Oh hell, internet. Well, when I first started writing this piece, the immediate context of the show was COVID-19. Now that has actually moved on already. 2020 has been quite an exciting year, but COVID still requires some broad context, I think. I was impacted, of course, but less so. I happen to be in Thailand, which has dealt with the pandemic very well. I think you can say that, although their numbers are suspiciously low and testing was not great here. However, it's not a problem now. That much is absolutely clear. And like many places in Asia, mask wearing in Thailand is something people did already. You know, it's just when you're sick, you wear a mask to stop others getting sick. That's just what they do here. Oh, and by the way, the temperature out here is frequently over 40 degrees C, so masks are not that uncomfortable to wear. You get used to them in the same way you get used to your clothes. But every country has been economically impacted. Now, for me, the economic impact has been fairly low because I can earn money teaching online. That is not true for everyone during lockdown, but ultimately, because I'm on the left, the answer for me is easy. The government just pays everyone. Not saying there won't be some economic impact down the road, but governments have spent far more in return for far less in the past than making sure everyone in their country stays comfortable during a global situation. But with everyone paid, we could then have the discussions over who should stay closed for the sake of not forming hubs of infection. Schools and hairdressers, for example, all of those we should be very careful about reopening because, you know, in schools it's a question of numbers of people coming together and you can't keep kids from getting into each other's personal space. And then for hairdressers, it's just the sort of closeness of the exchange. It's a small place where people come and go, but then they go back to separate families. And I know that many hairdressers are small businesses themselves. And like I say, the government should be paying people who are staying closed basically what they were getting paid anyway. And, you know, I understand the idea of getting back to work as well and providing the service. And in the case of hairdressers, maybe they could be given client limits or something like that so that they don't see as many people in a day. And even in this context, there are still problems with it because then you have the arguments about, well, who doesn't get paid? You know, who has to go back to work and why does the government only pay them instead of everybody, and so on and so forth. These are all questions which could be meaningfully discussed instead of turned into pathetic political sound bites. It's almost like there's a group of people who don't want you to be thinking seriously about the issues. And it would be good to answer these questions now because thankfully COVID-19, it turns out, has not been that serious a pandemic. Now, don't get me wrong, it's been an absolute tragedy around the world. But, you know, as a disease, in terms of what it represents and our ability to fight it, if we just follow some of the recommendations of the medical professionals, it's not been that bad, and many countries have demonstrated this. But that might not be true next time. This time, medical technology, broadly speaking, was ahead of the virus. But that might not be true next time. And we would do well to consider the lessons of COVID-19 in the global, modern mass societal context. But we won't. No, I see the world learning exactly the wrong lessons from COVID-19, reinforcing fossilized tribal mindsets because power is always too scared to try a different path. And they are always too eager to transfer that fear onto the people to convince them of that point of view. The last point on COVID-19 is the source of it. And I just want to say that there are two plausible explanations, I think. You know, there are many explanations, but either COVID-19 transferred from animal to human in the wet markets of Wuhan sometime around the middle of 2019, it seems, or possibly it did actually escape from a lab which is present in Wuhan province. And it seems like there are serious people considering both sides. One of those is true, one of those is not. But both of them appear to be plausible. I still lean in the direction of the wet markets theory because, you know, that does happen. You know, eventually, it's not about hygiene, it's about the numbers. Eventually, when you have humans coming into contact with animals, there may be a pathogen transmission. It's just about the genetic numbers at that point. And wet markets do increase those numbers considerably. So it's not unlikely that such a transmission would happen for the first time in a wet market. And I've seen these wet markets, and I've bought food there and taken it home and eaten it many, many times, as do billions of people every day. If it did escape from a lab, well, you know, every country is working on different viruses, especially the flu virus, and how to fight it and create new vaccines. This could likely have happened in any country. It happened in China, and one thing I will, you know, if you like, hold the Chinese government morally culpable for is the delay in putting out information. But I will also acknowledge that this is just keeping with China's historically precedented behavior. You know, whether you agree with that behavior or not is a different question, but it's not like they've done anything particularly different and uniquely malicious in what they did by not sharing that information faster. And maybe it's fair to say that pointing fingers and assigning blame is part of the West's historically precedented behavior. At the end of the day, COVID-19 starting in China seems equivalent to a number of other political errors that have been made by various countries, maybe even thinking they were doing the right thing. I would also add that the habits in the West of pumping their meat full of antibiotics, separating everyone in the population from the process of animals being turned into food, and then portioning out that meat in plastic cartons which require the resources of fossil fuels to create, is not uncontroversially a harmless process either, even if we limit ourselves to the spreading of deadly pathogens. There is a reason why superbug is a term in many modern Western hospitals. But wherever you go in the world, do you know what you see? People. Just people who are fallible, and powerful people are also people, as much as we might wish to think otherwise, for better and for worse. So we can just stop being so hyperbolic about what any one country is doing, be it the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans, or whoever on the world stage. No mass individual, particularly superpowers, is intelligent enough to play puppet master on the world stage. You know, I'm sure there is a lot that I don't know about what this, that, or the other country is doing. Fine. But the pandemic, to finish here, is a global issue which should be tackled globally. And you can point at China and say, well, they should have said something earlier. And that's fine, I agree with that. But, as the saying goes, never attribute to malice what is better described by incompetence. Isn't that right, fossil fuel industry?